it going. I'm a proud member of the company we keep. One is one, but one is many. Many are one. You know, we're all made of the same stuff. At the end of the day, if you want to, it's not about a topic of racism. It's the fact that there's always going to be more to know than we understand. Given who we are, given how many people, how many differences there is in this world among people. We've got to please the mind before we can, master any sort of effort to, get beyond time. Life's a bit like an hourglass. We're in the bottleneck of the situation right here. We start, we start our lives. There's all this past that we don't know about, that we can learn about, waiting to happen, evolve, and that. For many people, the past has already happened and the future has come along. And the future has been full of fucking prosperity. Egotistic kids, that are fond of their, atmosphere, fond of their existence, fond of their place in life, They have a feed for the thirst of evolution. It's hard to think about it, but, time can happen so quickly. These two parts, they're constantly expanding. So the matter of the situation constantly evolves and changes form. We came from being fucking marsupials, fucking apes and fucking gorillas to the people we are today. How did that come about? Or is that just a concept based on the nature of the aspect of life? But you could see this like the stars too. The stars are constantly being made and created from this pool of anatomy, pool of motion, where the Big Bang happened. And would the Big Bang be raising up in the atmosphere or descending into chaos? Because we all know it's the valley of the shadow of death. Your life flashes right before your fucking eyes, in moments of near-death experiences. But hasn't it always been flashing right in front of your eyes? And just that occurrence highlighted that fucking second, that minuscule moment. And, since you can think of the thoughts you've already friggin' lived, like the back of your hand, you can travel time. But time is obsolete. There's no time at all. There's only expansion of space. There's only this passage of time that we all know about. It can go on forever. It exists eternity. All you got to do is show up. Turn the glass dial, the hourglass over. But we live in the third dimension. There's three parts of the universe that makes up our world. Which could be seen as the sun, moon, and earth. We live here and we're stuck between two forms of light. The light in the darkness and the darkness in the light. That's why the sun, too much sun is not good for you. Creates skin cancer and that, The sun is the darkness that surrounds the many to the few that are fucking actually in resemblance, you know? Like, you might be in a group of people and only a few people stand out, but they all share the same qualities of the people around them, you know? What's in us is around us. Like, we are the earth itself. You know, oxygen could only exist because of fucking gravity, and gravity seems like glue stuck between the stars of a space with no matter. You know, there's no matter in space, but the only fucking matter is the magnification of which it expands, the lens it puts us through. You know, we're trapped forever to exist where we are, to where we stand. You know, the longer time goes on, the further the stars from distant planets get away from us. You know, so we can only evolve within our solar system. So the answer would be to moon hop. If what I'm saying is true, about the Druid belt, our moon is a part of Uranus. That's why we've got a city in New South Wales, or a town in New South Wales called Oberon. I don't know which came first, the naming of the moon or the town, but the town has a moon named after it. And that's on the Druid belt, the moon, 95 moons of Uranus. And you know, that just so happens to be where wood's fucking imported from to this local area, because we have the biggest timber mill in the southern hemisphere that operates within the limits of our society. So these three things happen simultaneously at once, but they don't move. They're not, you know, it seems like life stands still. But there's these big sways of motion at either end of the space we're in. And it doesn't necessarily expand our solar system as much as the fucking stars further away from us. So people say the multiverse is real. You know, just how far in the future can we think ahead of the current time? You know, once you've gathered a fucking good enough picture of how things are, to how things are, you know, to your expectation of how things are going to be, you know, based on the attitudes of the people around you. You know, like, it's like activating the combination safe lock. You know, you got to turn it left and you got to turn it right. You know, it's like a bearing on the mind. Like, people's attitudes adjust and you create the behaviour that we want to see. People act the way they feel they fucking are among the friends they have. And, you know, and your friends and your experiences and everything go into your godless identity. You know, many are one and one is many. You know, the stars are scattered like fucking grains of sand in an hourglass. You know? You know, what else can you fucking say to picture it? You know? We gotta wonder why we have drugs available to society. Is it to expand our mind? You know? Is it to change your perception in a situation where you're confined to think one way? You know? Is it society that are behind things like drugs? Or is it alternate space? And you know, you could say dark energy, because you know, the claim to fame of certain drugs is they take your identity. And you know, there's people out there that more so want you to live up to that picture than, then you actually fucking are capable of living up to that picture, given the guidance of God. In God we trust. All things are good from God, but dark energies got no faith, got no religion. They don't want to hear about any of that nonsense. They don't even say anything at all. They just case out the whole scenario and learn your human anatomy. Because they want to break down those barriers to make, the barriers that make the person you are in the fucking present time. They're all about, they're all about consequence, consequence from hindsight when it meets seriousness in the eyes of people that are the polite kind in society. A man who's not journeyed through the forest wouldn't know what to expect compared to a man who lives every day in the thing. There's no fears, there's no ultimatum of what will happen if this and that goes that certain way. Because you are constructed from the surrounding, the atmosphere, the environment you're brought up in. But they don't want, dark energy doesn't want any sort of construction in your life, It will pull apart everything you know about anyone you've ever met and say they fucking knew the same thing, They don't have a life. They're not really real, but you could say they're a part of your imagination. So, your own worst enemy is yourself, the man in the mirror. But what can a mirror do for us that nothing else can? It can reflect the light with no atmosphere, but it can also teach us to be more emotional in how we present ourselves. Dealing with a bold figure of a brick wall, so to say, not much happens. So you got to better learn to communicate yourself, your needs, your wants, your desires, and they will manifest, given you evolve at the right frequency. If your mind matches your frequency in life, like the body, mind, and soul, who knows what could happen? It shines a light that people, can't bear not to look at. But God's identity, that's who we are and what we've become from what we've known. The person, the memories made of the fucking, time absorbed, the motion perceived, That's why Einstein's third law of motion is every reaction has the same and opposite reaction, because you're learning something, And like when you know something, you know of something, it could lead to any sort of possibility. But it's a bigger concept on the World Wide Web. It's a bigger concept on the World Wide Web because, alongside our generation in recent history, in the 2000s, the 2000 millennium, we come up alongside smartphone technology, which is like a mirror of what we want to see. What we want to see in constructive planning, within our brains. That's why is made to a perfect standpoint. You know, basically you become the phone that's in your hand. And you can interact with the live world on the internet just as much as you can in reality. Your identity is mirrored from the masses of data, and including all your friends' data, everyone in your town, everyone in your country, and it's put together, and it crunches numbers and puts out a productive catalogue where every day is different, but it's the same evolution of time. Everyone, not you won't find everything yourself, but the information is out there. But you got to have a sense of connection to find that information. This is why we can't lose our identity. We can't get lost. It's like the stars. We call shooting stars. We call space junk entering our atmosphere a shooting star, even though these stars don't even move. But their identity in the gravity of the situation gets mimicked by something lesser. So we don't want to become lesser. We want to become more, and we want to become abundant. We don't want to be the lesser. Dark energy will break you down until you're less than what it is to be human at all. It can fucking change you into a different person. Giving you interact with that type of thing. But it's life. In a single grain of atom, there's a trillion. In a single grain of sand, there's a trillion atoms. What about that for a size comparison to the space of the space we're within? There's a space, and then there's a space that space is within. So we could be just a whole hourglass, while the inner working of our DNA is made up of trillions of stars that surround the universe that we subside in. There's more than one universe. That's the reason a grain of sand can hold a trillion atoms. Layers of the fabric of existence.